The wind had worried the Wyoming grass flat for 3 straight days, scraping dust against the windows of Caleb Ward's ranch house until the glass looked smoked. It came down from the bare hills with nothing to slow it, cold enough to sting the eyes, dry enough to split the skin across a man's knuckles. By sundown, the cattle stood with their tails to it and their heads bowed. Even the cottonwoods along Bitter Creek seemed tired of resisting. Caleb resisted because there was no one else to do it. He rose before first light, boiled coffee in a blackened pot, and ate yesterday's biscuit standing over the stove. Then he crossed the yard to break ice from the troughs. He checked the south fence, counted the heifers in the lee of the ridge, and carried hay to the old milk cow that had outlived both usefulness and good sense. Every task had its hour. Every tool returned to its nail. Inside the house, only 3 rooms showed signs of occupation. The small back bedroom stayed shut. A blue cup remained on a high shelf where dust gathered around it. Caleb never touched either one. 4 winters had passed since fever took his wife, Ruth, and the child she had carried. People in Bellwether stopped offering condolences after the first year. They stopped inviting him to supper after the second. By the 4th, they spoke of him as if solitude were a habit he had chosen, like chewing tobacco or sleeping late. Caleb let them. That March, the wind tore 2 sheets of tin from the barn roof and drove a loose gate hinge through the side of the chicken shed. By the time he rode to town for nails, flour, and lamp oil, the sky had turned the pale green color that meant more weather was coming. Bellwether amounted to a muddy street, a church, a general store, and a depot where the eastbound train stopped when the engineer remembered. Caleb tied his horse outside Hollis Mercantile. He had 1 boot on the boardwalk when the station master called his name. "Ward, woman came in asking for you." Caleb looked toward the depot. She sat alone on the bench beneath the timetable, both gloved hands closed around the handle of a brown suitcase. One corner of the case had split open. A strip of faded cloth hung through the tier and stirred whenever the depot door moved. Her gray traveling suit was too thin for the country, and dust marked the hem. She watched each wagon that passed as though expecting one of them to stop. Caleb remembered then the advertisement he had allowed Hollis to place 6 weeks earlier. Housekeeper wanted. Room, board, and monthly wage. Remote ranch. References required. He had received one answer, written in a careful hand by a Mrs. Mara Bell of Omaha. He had replied that the work was hard, and the nearest neighbor 8 miles away. He had assumed the plain truth would end the matter. Instead, the woman on the bench saw him looking. She stood too quickly. The torn suitcase tipped, and a stocking slipped through the gap before she pushed it back inside. "Mr. Ward?" Caleb removed his hat. "Mrs. Bell?" "Yes." The word came after the smallest pause. Outside, thunder moved beyond the hills. Caleb glanced at the single trunk beside her. There was no trunk, only the damaged suitcase, tied once around the middle with clothesline. "You were due Thursday." The bridge washed out east of Cheyenne. "Today is Monday." "Yes." She did not explain where she had spent the intervening days. Her face was pale from travel, but there was firmness in the way she held her chin. She looked near 30, perhaps a little older. A narrow silver ring hung on a cord at her throat. "I can pay for a room at the hotel tonight," she said, "if the delay has changed the arrangement." There was no hotel in Bellwether, only 2 rooms over the saloon. Caleb suspected she knew it. Rain struck the depot roof in 5 heavy drops. "Storm will flood the west road," he said. "We leave now or wait 2 days." Her fingers tightened on the suitcase handle. "Then I am ready." Caleb loaded the case behind the wagon seat. When he pulled the clothesline secure, the torn corner opened wider. Inside lay 2 plain dresses, a hairbrush, a book of hymns, and an envelope covered in dark fingerprints. Mara reached past him and folded the flap shut. "It was damaged on the train," she said. Caleb nodded as if he had not noticed the rough slice across the leather, too straight to have come from a fall. They rode west under a hard rain. Mara kept her shoulders straight and asked no questions until the buildings disappeared behind them. "How many people live at the ranch?" "1. Your letter mentioned a family house." "It is a house. It belonged to my family." She turned toward the gray road. "I understand." Caleb was not sure she did. He was not sure he had understood what it would mean to bring another voice beneath that roof. The advertisement had been Hollis's idea after Caleb burned 2 suppers in 1 week and came to town wearing a shirt with the cuff half torn away. He had wanted someone to cook, clean, and leave the closed rooms closed. A practical arrangement, nothing more. At the ranch, Mara stood in the kitchen while Rain tapped the stovepipe. Caleb showed her the flour barrel, the pump, the root cellar, and the hook for the back door key. He opened the guest room across from his own. It held an iron bed, a washstand, and a cedar chest. "The stove draws badly in an east wind," he said. "Wages on the 1st. Sundays are yours." "Thank you. If you decide the place is too far out, I can take you back when the road clears." Mara looked down at the suitcase by her feet. "I agreed to 3 months," she said. "I keep my agreements." That first evening, she found salt pork, beans, and 2 soft onions in the pantry. She made a stew while Caleb mended harness at the table. The room filled with the smell of pepper and browned onion, a smell so ordinary that it unsettled him. Ruth had cooked that way, tasting with the wooden spoon and setting the lid slightly crooked. Mara set a bowl before him. "Is this sufficient?" "It is food." She sat across from him with her own bowl. "That was not my question." Caleb tasted it. "It is good." She nodded once. That was their first supper. In the morning, Caleb woke to the sound of a broom. Mara had tied back her dark hair and opened the kitchen window despite the cold. On the sill sat 3 dead flies and a row of jars she had washed clean. "The wind puts the dust back," he told her. "Then I will sweep it again." She did. The early weeks settled into a rhythm neither of them named. Caleb brought in wood before breakfast. Mara left coffee warming at the edge of the stove. He ate in silence. She learned that he wanted his eggs hard and that he would not touch preserves. He learned she saved the heel of each loaf for the barn cats and never sang the hymns from her book, though sometimes her lips moved over the words. On the 6th day, he came in from fixing fence and found his torn cuff stitched with small, even thread. She had folded the shirt on his chair. The next morning, her suitcase was gone from beneath the guest room window. Caleb found it on the workbench in the barn. He cut 2 pieces of thin cedar, shaped them to the broken corner, and fixed them inside the leather with brass tacks. The straight slash remained visible, but the case held square again. He returned it to her door before breakfast. Mara ran her thumb over the repair. "You did not have to. It would have split farther. Still." Caleb went to the table. Beside his plate sat a small jar of blackberry preserves. He ate them without comment. April softened the ground. Bitter Creek rose brown against its banks, and the first prairie flowers appeared in sheltered places. Mara asked Caleb to show her the vegetable patch. He told her the soil was poor. She turned it anyway, working until blisters opened beneath her gloves. The next day, he left a pair of Ruth's old gardening gloves on the porch rail. He almost took them back before Mara saw them. She held them carefully. "Were these hers?" It was the first time either had acknowledged the life that remained in the house like a faint smell of smoke. Yes, I can use my own. Those are better. Mara put them on. The fingers were a little short. I will take care of them. She planted onions, beans, squash, and a row of sunflowers along the fence. Caleb thought the sunflowers wasteful. He did not say so. At the end of her first month, he placed her wages in an envelope beside her bowl. She counted nothing. She tucked the money inside her mended suitcase and locked it with a key she wore beneath her collar. Twice, riders appeared on the far road, and Mara stopped whatever she was doing to watch them. Once it was a peddler. Once it was two boys driving loose horses. Each time, she returned to her work with a stillness that lasted the rest of the day. Caleb noticed. He asked no question. In May, a calf came breech during a night storm. Caleb worked in the lantern glow, knee-deep in wet straw, while the frightened heifer kicked at the stall. Mara appeared in the barn doorway wearing her coat over her nightdress. "Bring more light," he said. She did not flinch from the blood or the animal's cries. She held the lantern low, then pressed both hands against the heifer's neck when Caleb told her. An hour later, the calf lay breathing in the straw. Mara sat back against the boards, her face damp with rain and effort. The heifer turned and began licking her calf. "Will it live?" she asked. "Likely." Mara laughed once, softly. Caleb had not heard that sound from her before. He carried the lantern back to the house. She walked beside him. At the porch, their shoulders touched. Neither moved away at once. After that night, the silences changed. They no longer felt like locked doors. Some evenings, Mara read by the lamp while Caleb repaired tack. Sometimes she read aloud from the newspaper, skipping the politics and choosing small notices about crop prices, weddings, and a dog that had traveled 40 miles home. Caleb began bringing back newspapers, even when he had no other reason to visit town. He built shelves in the pantry because she had arranged the jars on boards balanced over flour tins. She patched the canvas cover on his wagon. He sharpened her kitchen knives. She saved the crispiest edge of cornbread for him. He pretended not to know. When summer came, heat spread over the valley and held there. The garden lifted green from the stubborn soil. Mara's sunflowers grew taller than the fence. She stood among them one morning, tying stems to stakes, with yellow pollen on her cheek. Caleb reached out before thinking and wiped it away with his thumb. Mara went still. So did he. "Pollen," he said. "I know." He walked to the barn and spent half an hour searching for a hammer that was already in his belt. By July, Mara knew every gate, every hen, and every weakness in the roof. She named the barn cat Duchess and the orphan calf Button. Caleb refused both names in speech, but used them when he thought she could not hear. One Sunday, she asked to ride into Bellwether for church. Caleb hitched the wagon. At the edge of town, her face tightened. "You can wait here," he said. "No, I have spent enough time being afraid of streets." Inside the church, people turned to look. Hollis's wife smiled too broadly and asked whether Mara found ranch life lonely. Mara answered that loneliness did not always depend on distance. Caleb saw Mrs. Hollis consider that for a week of gossip. After the service, a train whistle sounded. Mara dropped the hymn book. Caleb picked it up. "You expecting someone?" "No." The answer came fast. On the ride home, she kept one hand closed around the silver ring at her throat. Caleb finally understood it was a wedding band. "Your husband dead?" he asked. Mara watched the road. "Yes." "Long? 2 years?" He waited. "His name was Daniel," she said. "He worked accounts for a packing company in Omaha. After he died, they allowed me to keep his room if I took in sewing. Later, they decided they had allowed enough. It was more than she had told him in 4 months. Caleb accepted it without pressing. Ruth liked sunflowers, he said. Mara looked at him. I thought they were wasteful. They are, she said. That is part of their charm. Caleb smiled before he could stop himself. The first frost came early, silvering the garden in the last week of August. Mara and Caleb covered the beans with feed sacks by lantern light. In the morning, most had survived. The sunflowers had not. Their blackened heads bent over the fence. Mara cut one and hung it upside down in the barn to dry for seed. For next year, she said. Caleb looked at her. She seemed to realize what she had promised and lowered her eyes. If you still need a housekeeper. I expect I will still eat. It was as near as either came to asking her to stay. 3 days later, 2 riders came up the west road. Caleb was shoeing the bay mare when Mara stepped out of the kitchen with a dish towel in her hand. She saw the riders and stopped. The towel slipped into the dirt. One man wore a city coat despite the heat. He was broad in the middle, with a red face and a pale line, where a hat usually rested lower on his forehead. The other wore a deputy marshal's badge. Mara backed toward the door. Mrs. Voss, the city man called, you have made this tiresome. Caleb set down the mare's hoof. The man dismounted without invitation. Silas Pike, Pike Provision Company. This woman was employed in my office under her proper name, Mara Voss. She fled Omaha after stealing company funds and private records. The deputy remained near his horse. He looked tired rather than hostile. I have a warrant to search her belongings and bring her back for inquiry. Caleb turned to Mara. Her face had lost all color. Is Belle not your name? It was my mother's. Did you take money? No. Pike gave a short laugh. Ask her what she did take. Mara's eyes moved to the house, to the guest room, to the suitcase. Caleb felt something close inside him, not because Pike had accused her, and not even because she had lied. It was the knowledge that every quiet meal and mended shirt had existed beside a locked case she never meant to open for him. Deputy has lawful paper, he said. I will not obstruct it. Mara flinched, as if his words had struck harder than Pike's. They entered the house. The deputy read the warrant aloud. It named $60 in cash, a payroll ledger, and correspondence belonging to Pike Provision Company. Mara brought the suitcase from her room and placed it on the table. Caleb saw the cedar repair at the corner, the brass tacks catching the light. She unlocked the case. Inside lay her dresses, folded with care, the hymn book, and the envelope Caleb had seen at the depot. The deputy searched each item. He found $38 in wages, all in envelopes marked in Caleb's hand. No ledger. Pike seized the empty case and struck its bottom with his fist. She has hidden it. The repaired corner gave a dry crack. Mara stepped forward. Do not break it. Pike tore Caleb's cedar brace loose. Beneath it, between the lining and the leather, lay a thin packet of folded pages. The room became very quiet. The deputy opened the packet. Rows of names and figures filled each sheet. Pike reached for them, but the deputy pulled them away. Those are copies, Mara said. Her voice shook. Daniel made them before he died. Pike's face darkened. Stolen company records. Records of wages withheld from immigrant laborers who could not read the pay slips. Charges for beds that did not exist. Charges for tools they never received. Daniel found it. He said he would report it. 3 days later, a loading platform collapsed beneath him. It was an accident. Perhaps. The deputy studied the pages. Where are the originals? Mr. Pike has them, unless he burned them. Pike looked at Caleb. You see what she is, a liar and a thief. Hand her over and be done with it. Caleb looked at the broken suitcase. The leather sagged around the cedar he had shaped with his own hands. He remembered Mara watching riders from the window, dropping the hymn book at the sound of a train, saving seeds for a spring she had never trusted herself to expect. Still, hurt made him slow. Why did you not tell me? He asked. Because men with homes do not risk them for women with warrants. You let me call you by another name. I let you call me by the only name that felt safe. The deputy folded the papers. Mrs. Voss must come to Bellwether while I send a wire to Omaha. Mr. Pike, you will come too. No one is under arrest until I verify the warrant and these figures. Pike objected. The deputy put one hand near his holster, and Pike stopped. Mara went to her room. She returned wearing her traveling coat. Caleb watched her gather the loose contents of the suitcase. The damaged corner would not hold. She wrapped the clothesline around it, the same way it had been tied at the depot. Caleb hitched the wagon without speaking. In Bellwether, the deputy placed Mara in a room behind his office. Not a cell, but the window had bars. Pike took the room over the saloon. The telegraph line east was down after a lightning strike, and no answer could come before morning. Caleb stood outside the marshal's office as evening fell. Through the window, he could see Mara sitting on a wooden chair with the suitcase between her feet. He had every right to feel deceived. He told himself that twice. Then Hollis came along carrying a crate of lamp chimneys. Bad business, Hollis said. Best keep clear until it is settled. Caleb looked at him. That what you would do? Hollis shifted the crate. A man's name is worth something. Caleb thought of 4 winters alone in a house where nothing moved unless he moved it. He thought of coffee kept warm, clean jars in a row, a calf breathing in wet straw, and sunflower seeds hanging in the barn. So is a woman's, he said. He entered the office and asked the deputy to let him speak with her. Mara sat beneath a smoking lamp. Her hands rested on the torn suitcase. For the first time since arriving, she looked as she had on the depot bench, ready to be moved along by someone else's decision. The deputy says you can remain here tonight, Caleb said. If Omaha confirms the warrant, there will be a hearing. I know. If the papers clear you, you can go wherever you choose. Mara's fingers tightened around the clothesline. Caleb heard how his words sounded. Formal, careful, the same words a man used when returning a borrowed tool. I should have told you, she said. Yes. I wrote the advertisement because I needed somewhere Pike would not think to look. I meant to stay 3 months. Then I meant to leave before the truth followed me. But you saved seed. She looked down. That was foolish. Caleb sat on the bench opposite her. Did you take the $60? No. Daniel left me $42. Pike refused my final pay and claimed I owed rent. I sold my sewing machine for the train fare. Did you believe Pike caused Daniel's death? I do not know. That is the truth. I stopped knowing which fears were sensible. Outside, a horse passed on the street. Mara lifted her eyes to Caleb's. When you brought that suitcase from the barn, I thought you had found the papers. I thought you would send me away. Every day after, I waited for it. Then I began to hope you would not. Caleb looked at the cracked cedar brace. I was angry. You had cause. I still am. She nodded. Her face held no defense now, only exhaustion. When this is over, Caleb said, we will speak about the lie. Mara swallowed. And then? He should have answered plainly. Instead, old caution rose in him. He thought of Ruth's blue cup, the closed bedroom, and the terrible cost of letting another person belong anywhere inside him. Mara mistook his silence. Her voice fell to a whisper. "Don't send me away." The words were not dramatic. They were barely louder than the lamp flame. That made them reach him without anything to hide behind. Caleb leaned forward and rested his rough hand over hers on the suitcase handle. "I am not sending you anywhere," he said. "You came for work. You stayed because there was a place for you. The place is still there." Mara's eyes filled, but she did not look away. "Even if they take me east? Then I ride east. You hardly know me. I know how you mend a cuff. I know you give the best bread to someone else. I know you stand your ground with a frightened animal. I know you planted for spring." He pressed her hand once. "I know enough to begin." The telegraph line was repaired shortly after noon the next day. The answer from Omaha arrived in pieces over 2 hours. The $60 Pike claimed stolen had been found in the possession of his bookkeeper 3 weeks earlier. No amended warrant had been issued. A federal inspector had begun asking questions about Pike provision after 3 laborers brought matching pay slips to a legal aid society. The deputy read the telegram twice. Then he asked Pike to surrender his pistol and remain for questioning. Pike left Bellwether in custody on the eastbound train. Mara stood on the platform until the last car disappeared. She did not smile. Some endings were too heavy for triumph. Caleb loaded her suitcase into the wagon. He had bound the broken corner with a strip of harness leather. "Temporary," he said. "It has traveled with worse." On the road home, the hills shone gold beneath a clean blue sky. Mara told him the rest of Daniel's story. Caleb told her about the closed back room and the fever that had emptied it. Neither tried to make the other's loss smaller. They carried the stories between them, like something with weight, changing hands only when the other was ready. At the ranch, Mara paused beside the wagon. "Mrs. Voss," Caleb said. She looked up. "That is your name. No need to hide it here. Mara will do." He lifted the suitcase. "Caleb, then." Autumn came dry and bright. The beans filled 3 burlap sacks. The squash lined the cellar shelves. Caleb repaired the suitcase properly, replacing the shattered cedar and sewing a new leather corner over the old scar. He did not hide the repair. Mara said she preferred it that way. On the first cold night, she placed Ruth's blue cup on the kitchen table and filled it with late asters from the creek bank. Caleb stood in the doorway for a long moment. "I can put it back," she said. "No." He crossed the room and touched one small purple flower. "It was made to be used." That winter, the wind returned. It scraped dust against the windows and searched every seam in the roof. But the stove drew well after Caleb reset the pipe, and there was enough wood stacked beneath the eaves. Mara read the newspaper aloud while he worked at the table. Her repaired suitcase rested open on the cedar chest, no longer locked, holding folded summer clothes and a packet of sunflower seeds. In March, when the ground softened, they planted those seeds together along the fence. Caleb made the holes. Mara dropped in each seed and covered it with her gloved hand. At the last hole, their fingers met in the cold earth. Caleb turned his hand and held hers. Beyond them, the empty land stretched wide beneath the morning sky. The wind still moved over it, hard and restless. But at the house behind them, the kitchen door stood open, and it no longer opened onto silence.